Now I remember what I was going to tell you about. The whole thing, the whole mess, was Bonnie's idea. Bonnie and I, in 1964, were total misfits at Hashomer Hatzair winter camp. Now, first of all, we were from Southern California, which meant we didn't really know what winter was, right? We had some romantic notions about snow that did not include slippery, icy paths or hard piles of dirty brown snow or shivering under our sleeping bags in the cabin. But what really set us apart was that this was, as I said, a Zionist camp, Hashomer Hatzair. So that meant that all of the campers were connected deeply, their families were, to Israel and to Judaism. Now, Bonnie and I didn't even know what Zionism meant. We were from secular families. That meant that we celebrated Passover and Hanukkah, but the rest of it, we really didn't know much about it. So what were we doing at this Hashomer Hatzair camp? Well, the cousin of a friend had kind of lured us into the summer camp the summer before, and as I said, since it was kind of an Israeli-run camp, there wasn't a lot of adult supervision. You know, back in the 60s, Israelis. So we could, at summer camp, make out with boys behind the tents and not get in trouble. So we figured at winter camp, we could make out with boys in the snow. So there we were. And on about the fifth day, at Chugim time, now Chug, it means club, so Chugim time was when we had different groups, like arts and crafts, or folk dancing, or drama. At Chugim time, Bonnie came up to me and said, "Let's ditch." Now, I liked Chug time because I was in the drama club, right? And we were putting on a play. Now, I got to play a Hebrew woman named Zillah, and I got to wear a white turban, and I got to say these words to my husband in the play: "I denounce you and everything you betoken." I didn't know then that those words contained the seeds to my future as a strong Jewish woman and a storyteller. All I knew then was that I liked saying the words, and I liked the way the white turban looked on my head. But Bonnie said, Bonnie didn't like Chug time at all because she didn't like arts and crafts. She didn't like folk dancing. She didn't like drama. The only thing she liked was sports, and they didn't have that. So she said, "I've got a plan." Now, I was instantly wary because when Bonnie had a plan, it often did not go well. But I was curious, so I said, "What's the plan?" And she said, "It's Christmas Eve. Let's go up the mountain and cut down a Christmas tree and bring it down into the mess hall tonight." I said, "Bonnie, this is Jewish camp. Are you crazy?" She said, "That's why it will be so funny." Okay, Bonnie, even if this was a good idea, which it is not, how are we going to get a Christmas tree all the way down the mountain into the mess hall? And she said, "Bryan will help us." Now, Bryan was the boy who followed us around because he had a crush on Bonnie. Now, if Bonnie and I were misfits at Hashomer Hatzair, well, Bryan was in another category altogether. He was a total misfit in life. His tall, gawky frame kind of reminded me of the skinny cedar tree that would scratch against the window of our cabin all night long, as if it was asking to get in. I didn't realize then that Bryan made me uneasy because he touched something kind of soft and scary in me that I did not want to feel when I was a teenager. The only thing I knew then was that I was really glad he had a crush on Bonnie and not on me. But I said, okay, even if you and I and Bryan could get a Christmas tree, how would we cut it down? And she said, "Bryan has a pocket knife." Aha, you're laughing. And that's what I said because there were no Jewish men that I knew that had pocket knives. My dad was a CPA, Bonnie's dad was a personnel manager, and neither one of them had a pocket knife in his pocket or any other tools for that matter or any use for them whatsoever. I said, "No, he doesn't." But right then, Bryan appeared from behind a tree with his pocket knife in his hand. He had a way of sort of showing up that gave me the creeps. And we started walking up the mountainside. Now, as we walked up, I was still debating with Bonnie, and I said, now look, how is he going to cut down an actual Christmas tree with this little puny pocket knife? And she said, we'll get a small one, like Kent's. Now, Kent was Bonnie's older brother. Now, Christmas trees, even though we were secular Jews, Christmas trees were pretty much taboo. We had menorahs. My sisters and I had 3 little brass menorahs that I actually really loved, and one big family menorah. But in Bonnie's family, they had one menorah. Their enthusiasm wasn't so great for it. And Bonnie's brother, Kent, had begged and pleaded his mother for a Christmas tree for so long that she finally said, all right, you can have a Christmas tree, but you have to keep it in your bedroom with the door closed. So my sisters and I would go across the street to visit Bonnie's house, Kent and Bonnie, and we would sneak right down the hallway into Kent's bedroom to see that little Christmas tree sitting on his bedside table like a shameful, glittering secret. And so Bonnie and I and Bryan continued up the hill, and I could see sort of down the hill, I could still see campers kind of scattering around, and I thought, I wonder if they're going to notice that we're missing. But we had picked the camp because it lacked adult supervision, so there wasn't much chance of that. In fact, I think maybe I wanted somebody to come after us, but nobody did. And we went higher and higher up into the mountains, and we were kind of zigzagging off of the beaten path, and there was more and more snow, and the faux leather boots that I'd bought at Orbach's department store were getting soggier and soggier. And finally, we came to a little clearing, and there was a little spindly little tree in the middle of it, and Bonnie said, that's our baby. And Bryan started sawing away at the Christmas tree, the little pine tree, with his pocket knife. And I was sort of bouncing up and down, trying to keep my feet from freezing. And Bonnie started singing, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas. And Bryan was sawing away. And my mind started racing. I was thinking, what if they did miss us? What if they thought we were lost? What if we actually were lost? What if they called our parents? What if they sent a search party? And my mind was halfway through a scenario that included a St. Bernard and violin music and keg of brandy when I heard that trunk snap. And Bonnie reached for that little Christmas tree and swung it over her head, and she started singing, Dashing Through the Snow with a one-horse open sleigh. And Bryan grabbed it, and he started running around and singing, and I joined them too, Jingle bells, jingle bells. And we were about to go down, but Bonnie said, one more thing. And she pulled out of her pocket some tinfoil that she had stolen from the camp kitchen the night before, and shredded into little strips, and then we decorated the spindly little branches until it was all glistening with tinfoil, and it looked really lopsided and forlorn. And Bonnie said, very Christmassy. And then we picked it up, and we started walking down the mountainside. Now, it was getting dark, and Bonnie was giving us instructions on just what we were going to do. So we would, on Bonnie's signal, walk into the mess hall carrying the Christmas tree, Bryan in the middle, Bonnie and I on either side, and we would sing, we wish you a Merry Christmas, holding the Christmas tree. Now, as we got closer down the mountain, I could see the lights coming from the windows of the mess hall. And as we got closer, I noticed that it was kind of a soft, glowing light. Now, I should have known that that meant candlelight. And I should have known that that meant Shabbat. For those of you who aren't Jewish, that's the very special Friday night holiday where you light candles. But I didn't know because at my house we did not light candles on Shabbat. Now, I had seen my grandmother lighting Shabbat candles once in a while in her kitchen with some stubby little white candles, and she would wave her hands and she would say the bracha in her thick Russian accent. And I thought it was like some quaint, old-fashioned custom that she'd brought over from Russia that we didn't need anymore, like the treadle sewing machine or the wringer washer that she had in her garage. And so we walked a little closer, and we stood in front of the mess hall door. And we stood in formation, Bryan in the middle, Bonnie and I on either side, each of us holding onto that tree. I had never been so close to Bryan that I could smell his sweat. And Bonnie said, now. And we burst into that mess hall and we started singing, we wish you a Merry Christmas. And we were bouncing that Christmas tree up and down. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Now, it is hard for me to fathom that we actually expected laughter, but we did. But no, everybody turned around and stared at us. It was dead quiet, as if everyone in the room had taken a breath and had forgotten to exhale. And Bonnie said, louder, and we kept on singing. We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Stares, silence, glowing candles. Bonnie said, Happy New Year, it's Christmas Eve, Merry Christmas. I motioned for her to be quiet. Shh, it's funny, she said. Get it? Well, I didn't really get it, but I had forgotten that I had been at a Shabbat once. I had been at a Shabbat at that summer camp. And I remembered now, when I looked at all those faces, I remembered how everybody dressed up for Shabbat. And I remembered how the faces looked washed clean in those flames. I remembered how it reminded me of my grandmother. I remembered how the candlelight made me feel old and young and how time stood still. And it was very, very still right then. My cheeks were getting really hot and my feet were really cold. And Bonnie said, come on again. I said, no. She said, it's funny, get it? Bonnie, I said, be quiet. If I could get it now, if I could go back, I would see how much I longed to be in that light. I might see now that even though nobody sent a search party, we were lost. Well, eventually, we were escorted out of the dining room, and that Christmas tree, I think, ended up in a trash can. I don't know if we officially got in trouble or not, but in the next couple of days that were left, well, we were even a little more separated from the other campers. I think I redeemed myself a little bit by being an especially fierce Hebrew woman with a turban in the play. And Bonnie, I think, got a couple of secret admirers, rebellious admirers as well. It's been about 50 years since that Christmas Eve, and it's taken me a long time to kind of find my way back into that candlelight, find my path back to Judaism. My first husband was a Lutheran, a German Lutheran, about as far from my parents' Jewish intellectual roots as possible. My second husband, as you know, actually when David and I got married, we were completely estranged from Judaism, but when our daughter was born and we lit our first Hanukkah candles, the path was like quicksand, and as you know, what happened now. We're very, very involved with Judaism. Bonnie, however, married a Jewish man the first time, second husband not Jewish, but never practiced Judaism with either of them. Now, we stayed in touch over the years. And on the year when David was becoming a rabbi, I talked to Bonnie on the phone. And I told her that my husband was becoming a rabbi, and she said, are you Jewish? I said, yes, 100%. She said, you light candles and everything? I said, yes, every week on Shabbat. And so every now and then, when Hanukkah falls around Christmas time, a few years ago it even fell on Christmas Eve, when I look into those Hanukkah candles sometimes, I look into the flame and I can see the glint in Bonnie's eye when she looked at me and said, I have a plan. And that's the story of the Hanukkah Christmas tree. And I call it a path through snow.